Hi, welcome to Making Sense of Movies. I'm Alaina.
I'm Claire.
And welcome to the podcast. Today's episode, we are going to be discussing movies that fucked you up. And Claire, what does that mean?
Okay, well, it's movies that I guess just stick with you and are just so goddamn weird. You're like, oh my god, remember when that happened? Like, that was crazy. That was just freaking crazy.
Yeah, movies that when you leave the theater, you can't stop thinking about them.
Yeah.
And truly mess with your mind.
Yeah.
So it's a bit of a niche field, but we found 5 really good films.
And we're real, because when we first made a list of what we wanted to talk about, like, this is one of the categories we were really excited about.
Oh, yeah. And we feel like we're at the point with our audience where we can talk about this.
Yep, after 6 episodes, we're ready.
We're ready. So we're going to go from least fucked up to most fucked up. And where are we going to start?
Oh, we're going to start with Ex Machina. And it's all about AI. The main character, Caleb, is going to, played by Domhnall Gleeson, goes to this eerie house in the middle of the woods because he got invited, won a lottery, to do a project about AI with Nathan, who's the main character one of the main characters by Oscar Isaac. How do you feel about this movie?
I really like this movie. I think this was also one of the first times I had been introduced to all of these actors. So other people in this movie is Alicia Vikander. She plays the AI. And I haven't really heard of like Oscar Isaac or Domhnall Gleeson, I think, before this. One thing I really enjoyed about this movie is that the director or the writer, they're not explaining anything to the audience. They start out, like, the first scene is our main character. We don't know his name. All we know is that he's won something. You don't know why he's won something. You don't know what exactly it is. You don't know where he's going. And I found that so fresh and interesting to watch because as an audience member, you have to figure it out. And they give you clues and you start to figure it out more as the movie goes on. But it was a really fun watch.
Yeah, and no, that's very good because it's sort of like you're in his position where it's like the whole time, like Caleb's also trying to figure out like, what the hell am I doing here? What's this whole facade? What's going on?
Yeah.
And he's like the main perspective taking you through this whole journey. And I think Domhnall Gleeson was a really good choice because you always want to feel sorry for him. Like, he's just got that face. Like, I just feel like he's got that face where you always want to feel sorry for him. And Oscar Isaac, I think...
He was incredible.
He does he just transforms in this movie.
Yeah.
Because he seems like such a lovable guy in real life. And in this, he's just like... kind of an abusive drunkard.
Yeah, so in the movie, Oscar Isaac basically plays the head, basically Domhnall Gleeson's boss. He, like, basically created this whole search engine, and he now, I guess, is bored by that and has decided to create artificial intelligence, and he's made them all women, which is a great play on gender.
So he gives the AI sexuality in order to throw off Caleb during the AI test.
Yeah.
And the whole time you're thinking, it's Caleb testing the AI, but really the whole point of him being there is, she's going to use her all of her abilities in order to escape, to see if she can, which is the real test of the AI. So It's not really, looking back, Caleb's not really the main character. It's almost like Ava's the main character through his perspective because he's a pawn and she's the one who's like our protagonist. And honestly, like the first time I watched it, I was like, what happens at the end is Ava kills Nathan and traps Caleb. And the whole time, the thing that's fucked up about it is you're just thinking, how could she do this after he tried to help her? But looking back, I didn't feel the same pity I did the first time around.
I didn't either.
I was really happy that Ava escaped and she goes out into the real world
She took some, she had this newfound independence that she was basically stuck in this glass room the entire film, and Caleb asked her at some point, have you ever been outside? Have you ever done anything? And she's like, no, I haven't. This is the only place I know.
And the one thing just rethinking about this movie is it reminded me a lot about zoos, just because hear me out.
I can see that.
Yeah, because it's just like we have all these like complex animals at the zoo, but they're so unhappy just because, like, they want to be challenged just like humans do. And it was the same thing here where, like, Ava's so smart and since she's been, like, programmed through all of society. And they had shown the previous AIs where they had just, like, gone crazy and, like, were banging at the doors until, like, their hands came off.
Yeah.
And they're just so unhappy. So, like, I do feel like they added enough where you, like, you get to the end and you are happy for Ava. So maybe it's not such an effed up ending after all. She got out.
I think what's effed up, especially like when I first watched it, was the fact that she full on like takes advantage of the whole situation. Like she leaves Caleb essentially to die. There's no way he's surviving. And she goes and becomes like assimilated with human life, and not a single person knows that she's AI.
Yeah.
Which in the end was the point of Caleb being there. Like he's supposed to be doing the Turing test, which is to determine if like an AI is like human or like understands like human emotions and things like that. One thing I really liked about this movie was the look of it. Yeah. It was very clean looking. And that really reminded me, and I'm dumb to realize this, when I was watching I was like, this reminds me of Annihilation. Like I wonder why, and it's because it's the same director who directed both Annihilation and Ex Machina, and I thought like this was so great. He does a really good job of setting the scene, especially with the music. Yeah. The way everything looks so clean, it made me uncomfortable because you know something is gonna happen. They're like isolated, yet everything's made out of glass, so it's as if things are transparent, but really nothing's transparent.
That was what I was going to say. Or like it looks transparent, but there's just so many secrets behind it. Yeah.
Also, it has a pretty iconic dance scene.
The dance scene is great. And I love in that scene where Oscar Isaac or Nathan is so upbeat with Kyoko, and they're just like having a good time. And the whole scene is set in red, which is
I love the
it's
lighting.
The color of evil. The color of evil.
I also I thought Nathan, he's like basically he's rich, he's isolated, he's very like brute and feels a superiorness over everyone around him. Yeah. I thought Oscar Isaac did a great job, but also in the way that like he interacts with Caleb and the different ways he interacts with the AI showed that really well.
Oh, so it won for Best Visual Effects, which I think is totally deserving.
Also, so if you don't know, so the way they show the AI, it's Alicia Vikander, she's an actress. It's her face, and like she has human hands and I think human feet. Everything else is either like this mesh towards her stomach or like some sort of glass that's see-through that you can see wires in. So it's not like she looks like a human the whole time. Like you can tell from the beginning she's AI. It's more like I can see what that is more the visual effects is because she seems very real, even though as an audience member and as like Caleb knows she's not.
Okay, also, the other thing I was going to bring up is that I love the setting, how they make it so isolated, because then you get to the end, and you always want to do that thing where you put yourself in the position of the character who's having a real tough time, and you just know that he can't get out. He's just so far away from everyone that
there's no way Caleb is surviving. I guess soon. I remember when I first watched it, I was like, oh, like will he survive or something like that? And the second time around, I was like, nah, he's like dying. Yeah. Because he's locked in this room, and I assume she cut the power. Because when you cut the power, the doors automatically lock. And in the movie, they foreshadow this. Nathan says, oh, it's so that no one can come in. And I wrote, no, it's so that no one can leave. So.
Oh, and I also thought the other thing interesting about it is that they say at the end that Ava was designed off of Caleb's pornographic information. Like
I
what
thought
he found
sexually arousing. Chosen for this. It wasn't that he didn't win anything. He was 100% chosen specifically for this. So, like, how Nathan created Ava was that he has his search engine, and he turned on the microphones and the data software, like, to recognize faces. And he basically used all of that information to then create an artificial intelligence. So I thought, obviously, like, as soon as he said that, I was like, okay, he must have chosen Caleb, because there's no way this was an accident.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think that's all I have to say about Ex Machina. Should we move on?
We should move on.
Okay.
But yeah, this movie makes you think. I really liked it.
Yeah, it really does. Okay. So next we're doing Sorry to Bother You from 2018.
It's fairly new. This is directed by Boots Riley.
Yeah, and is this Boots Riley? I think it was his first. Was it his first movie?
I don't know.
Okay, I'm sorry, I don't know either. But
it has one of our favorites, Lakeith Stanfield.
Oh, he's so.
If you don't know, we talked about him in Knives Out and in Get Out as well. But this is, I think, one of, for me, his first like starring roles after he was supporting in those. I thought he was great. He was funny in this. And essentially, this movie is about our main character, Cassius Green, who becomes a telemarketer, and he he like isn't successful when he's a telemarketer unless he uses his white voice. And basically he starts to, and the white voice essentially is like this worry-free voice. Like, they have no worries. They have the bills paid. Like, you should be lucky to be talking to them. And he uses this to basically bring up the ladder of this telemarketing scheme, and shit gets weird.
Yeah, because he's just like, it's this back and forth between his old life and his new life, and he's just giving up everything to get further up the ladder, which involves like kind of going against his friends and his girlfriend who are working for a union trying to get higher wages. And obviously, like, you think, okay, like, maybe, you know, he's gonna have a change of heart, and he's gonna, you know, realize his girlfriend and his friends need him, and they deserve higher wages, and he does do this, but it's mostly because he realizes that they're turning people into horses. And that's where it gets really freaking weird. And that's not until, like, the very end. So it's mostly normal, apart from the using your white voice, which, like, you kind of get used to after a while.
You do, because once he gets higher up, they can only use their white voice at work.
Yeah.
So, like, before, where he was coming into work using his normal voice, he had to literally, like, start using it as soon as he walked in the building.
And as he just continues to do this, his white voice kind of merges into his real life, and there's one scene where he's in the, like, sleeping with his girlfriend, Tessa Thompson, who I love in this. We'll talk about her later, though.
Yeah, her costume's great.
Costume's great. And there's one morning he wakes up, starts using the white voice, and she's like, oh, you have to, like, stop it with that voice. Like, I don't want to hear that. And then he has to be like, oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't even realize I was using it. But yeah, really unique movie. Great color palette. I love all the neon colors.
I love the
Tessa Thompson, all of her costumes are so good. Like, overall, just such a good character. I love her politically motivated earrings that she wears because they're really big. That's murder, murder, murder on one earring and kill, kill, kill.
Yeah,
and there's another that says, tell Homeland Security we are the bomb.
Also in this film, Terry Crews plays Cassius Green's uncle, who is where he lived in the beginning, and who's going to be losing his house, which was was Cassius Green's motivation to continue telemarketing, so that he can keep his house. And then there's also Steven Yeun, who plays Squeeze, who was kind of the instigator for the like, protests in the union.
Yeah, because one of the other things they're protesting is there's this new company, and it's the workers live there.
Yeah, so it's called Worry Free, and they allude to this the entire movie. Like, there's no way you watch and you don't know who Worry Free is. And I thought the commercials were so funny. They used like an MTV Cribs like commercial to show you what's going on, and essentially, like, it looks like a prison. It essentially is a prison. It's compared to slavery multiple times, and essentially where you sign a contract and you work for free, but you don't have to worry anymore because you have a place to stay, and you have food, and you have, like, a community.
Yeah, and these end up being the people who get turned into the horses at the end.
Because they want better, like, physical labor, and they're like, you know who doesn't get tired? Horses don't. And they're, like, they look crazy.
I know.
Like, you think, like, okay, they're just gonna have a bunch of horses. It's like, no, they're human-horse hybrids, and they look really weird, and they talk like humans. And I had to pause and just think for, like, several minutes after it was over. I was like, I don't understand what's going on.
My least favorite thing in just movies overall that freaks me out the most is body horror, so I very much did not like to see this, because there's one scene where he first realizes what's going on, and they're all, like, all the horse people are begging for help. And then after this whole fiasco, and you kind of think that Cash is going back to his normal life, and he gets, like, his regular ideals back and morals, and you're like, oh, like, he's out of this for sure. Then he gets turned into a horse, and that's sort of where the movie ends.
Well, do you see the thing after? Oh, yeah, he's a horse at the end of the movie.
He's a horse at the end of the movie and goes back up to beat up the main boss.
Played by Armie Hammer, who is also pretty funny in this movie. But yeah, so I remember when I was watching, when I'm like, horse people, and my literal note was WTF, and then, so he shows this whole film about, like, oh, like, Armie Hammer showing Cassius Green because he's offering a job, and the job was essentially to become a horse person and infiltrate the horse people, so there's no, like, union making or no riots or anything like that. And he's like, watch this video, and it's this, like, claymation video of this, like, cave woman with was naked the whole time and doesn't change at all. And she's explaining like why horses are better and like how you become a horse is like you snort something. And before he had watched the video, Cassius had snorted something. So when I first saw it, I was like, oh no, he's gonna become a horse. And then he's like, of course I didn't give you any of that. And it wasn't until the end of the movie where you're like, nah, he did.
Yeah.
He gave him the powder.
I hated that so much. But the horse thing, it works really well from the point that like these are people giving their whole body to a company. Like, that's sort of what they're trying to show. Like, these people are working, like, people in real life working so hard that they have to physically give up just everything in order to make money in the world. And this was just
Animal
like...
Farm?
Oh, yeah,
Yeah,
Animal
so
Farm.
if you know about the horse in Animal Farm, you know, the horse works very, very hard. And I don't know, I haven't read this book in a while, but it definitely reminds me of this like horse metaphor going on that is very tied to working people and the physical labor that comes with working.
Yeah. And the other scene I wanted to bring up was at the party where the whole movie he's basically pretending to be white in order to make his way in the world. But then at the party when he's surrounded by all of his white colleagues, they want him to be like very stereotypically black and almost use him as entertainment, and they keep on saying like, oh, like we know you can rap, like rap for us.
And he's like, no, I'm actually really bad at rapping. It's like embarrassing. And then he does rap, and it's like, yeah, he's bad.
Yeah, but it's just like such a cringy scene on like everyone at the party's part. So that's something that stuck out to me.
One of the things I did like about this movie is that in the beginning, Cassius, like, he says that he's like, I don't understand, like, what my life purpose is. He's like, I'm just surviving. And then all of a sudden he gets telemarketing and he becomes really good at it. And that becomes his kind of life purpose. And that's why he doesn't mind, you know, like, not talking to his friends who are on the union trying to get more money. Because he's making more money and he's feeling like he has a purpose. Even though he's essentially, like, when he gets to the top, in his white voice, he's like, oh, are we just, you know, selling slave labor? Like, and they're like, yeah, we are. And he does it because he wants to be this better person who has a purpose.
He's just become so immersed in the lifestyle he's gotten used to.
Yeah.
And there's one scene I really like. It's just like very artistic, and it's like his small TV, and it's like blown up to like a flat screen TV. Just to show that he
get more money.
Yeah, gets more money because he complains a lot in the beginning about like, oh, he's living in a garage, he doesn't have this nice car, which he is really worried about. But his girlfriend, Tessa Thompson, she sees the world in a totally different light of like, it doesn't matter why we're here now, and that's the best part.
Yeah, and she's an artist, so that's her like life purpose that Cassius sees is like, oh, she does all this art, she does this really weird performance art where people are throwing like cell phones and balloons filled with blood, animal blood. Yeah. I also love the weird sense of humor. Yeah. There's a point where they're talking about telemarketing, and it's about, like, tag 'em and bag 'em. And this guy keeps talking about the morgue. He's like, yeah, you know, when you're in the morgue and you tag a body and then you take the body outside. And everyone is just super quiet, and they're like, what the fuck are you talking about?
Yeah. I also like the main lady with the black hair who's sort of like their boss during the telemarketing thing.
Oh, yeah.
I just think she's funny. I wrote down, just because everyone knows someone like her. She's got this one quote that says, we're family now. You know what that means? It means you lean on one another. There's a synergy. And then she's like, people are starting to get emotional. I love that. And just no one's emotional. They're all just staring there. It's sort of just like when a professor's like, come on, guys, isn't this so fun? And everyone's just dead silent. But it's funny. Well, not funny, but when Cash gets his promotion, she becomes like more attracted to him.
Yeah.
And they have a lot of themes in this about like, oh, the more money you have, the more people will be attracted to you. And they show at the end that, like, the Armie Hammer's character, he's, like, at the party surrounded by women. So, yeah.
I also like the way when he's doing a telemarketing call, he physically drops into wherever he is, whether that person is having sex with someone, or there's that old woman crying about her dying husband, and he's, like, physically there with them. I thought that was a great way, because telemarketing really much is a very physical barrier, and people who are like telemarketers, like, they're trying to sell you something, and I think by having him physically see the other person makes it a little bit less alienating.
Yeah. Oh, the other character who I really liked was Mr. Blank, and like they would beep out his name whenever he was on screen. He had an eye patch and a really crazy mustache.
Yeah, he was weird. I didn't really understand him. He was fun to like watch, but he was also like he's Mr. Blank. He's African American. He also like dons the white voice, just like Cassius does, and obviously like that's the only way for them to be successful is to be essentially white.
Yeah. And the point about the eye patch I was reading was because the main union group is called the Left. I forget exactly what it was, but Left something.
Left eye.
Left eye, and the eye patch was covering his left eye, like he was turning a blind eye to that organization. Which so many things in this movie are done that are just so smart and well thought out.
Yeah, just a fun note. There's
Danny Glover.
Yeah, so Danny Glover, he's in this movie. He's really great. He's the one who tells Cassius about the white voice, but they're at the bar, and one of my favorite scenes is when he's like, give me the good whiskey. And so the bartender opens like a little door on a bottle of whiskey and takes an even tinier bottle of whiskey and pours it into a cup. And I was like, that's just like great aesthetic. And that like doesn't describe how this movie is set. Like nothing will. Anything else you want to add?
I think the only other thing is David Cross plays the white voice, and he's just got a really funny voice.
Who is David Cross?
David Cross, he was in Megamind and Arrested Development, and he plays the caramel M&M on all the M&M commercials.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting.
All right, so we're going to move on to the next movie now, 2016's The Handmaiden.
Yeah, so this is a Korean film. The second Korean film on our list.
Yeah. And I think this one's going to be the hardest to talk about just because it's put into 3 different parts, and each one shows a different perspective of the whole movie, or of the first half of the movie, what we've seen so far.
So essentially what The Handmaiden is about is that there's essentially a Korean girl is sent to a woman's house, and she's supposed to be the handmaiden for this very wealthy woman. And that family is Japanese, and there's a sense that where like Japanese culture is seen in very high regard, while Koreans and Korean culture is seen in very low regard. And basically she's there, and the whole point is that she's there to infiltrate and basically make this woman fall in love with this guy so that he can steal her money.
Yeah.
That's essentially the film.
Yeah, the whole thing is he's trying to take her money, as you said. And they're going to trick the Countess into going into a mental institution. Like, that's the whole part of it.
Yeah, and then the handmaiden will then get some of the money, and so will he, and then they'll, like, run off.
Yeah.
So it's very confusing. It's obviously the 2 different cultures, but it's also in 2 different languages. They tell you in the beginning of the film, any, like, subtitles in yellow is spoken Japanese. Anything subtitled in white is Korean or another language.
Yeah. And the reason this is so, like, it just, like, plays with your mind the whole time, because at first you think that the handmaiden and the Count, they're in cahoots trying to get her in the mental institution, and then you find out that it's the Countess and the Count in cahoots to get the handmaiden in the mental institution.
And then at the end, it's really...
They're in love, and they screw him over because he's a horrible person.
So it's really the Countess and the handmaiden fall in love, and they're like, no, we gotta screw the men over in our lives. And then they have a happy ending.
Yeah.
But the one thing I really liked about this movie was, so in the beginning, every woman, especially the Countess and the handmaiden, are both seen as very naive children. Both when they in each person's perspective. So when it starts out in the handmaiden, the Countess is seen as very childlike. I described her when I was writing my notes as very like ditzy and dumb, and she's very baby-like. But also she's not really. She's quite smart.
And she's had this horrible upbringing where she's basically been trained since she was a little girl to read Japanese books that are very erotic, because that's what the uncle does. He sells books and has her read them. And the aunt, who you don't get to meet the aunt, do you?
No, she dies.
What happens to the aunt is that the uncle has this basement where it's basically a torture chamber, and the aunt tries to run away, and that was her old job, to like read the pornographic books, and he tortures her to death and then hangs her on the tree to make it look like a suicide. But because the main character Countess is so smart, she realizes, I read in a book that when people are hung, they have their tongues out, and like our aunt wasn't doing that, and the uncle shows her the basement and says, no, this is what happens, and this will happen to you if you run away.
So she's very scared.
Yeah.
So,
and she also, it drives her to her freedom. Like, she just wants to get away from the uncle.
Yeah. And then also what else happens? So both women are seen in each other's eyes as very dumb, but they're both really smart. So the handmaiden is seen also as like very dumb. She speaks very quickly and very girlishly. And then she talks to the audience. Both of them do. Anytime they're in someone's perspective. So in the beginning of the film, you don't know that she's tricking the countess. You just think, oh, there's this handmaiden who's maybe you think is going to become, rich or something like that. And she's going to this woman's house. And then maybe like 15 minutes into it, it goes, oh, you thought I was some dumb Korean girl? You're wrong. I'm actually here to steal her money. And she talks to the audience.
Pro pickpocketer.
Yeah, pro pickpocketer. She's really not this dumb girl. And I really like how they talk to the audience as a way kind of break the fourth wall and also break our own expectations of these women.
I feel like The Handmaiden is very rewatchable because when you go back and watch it, you're looking for all the things. There's just so much to pick apart, and it's also just so beautifully done. Like, all the scenes between the two girls, it's so delicate. It's like a really beautiful love story.
It is. They fall in love, and it's beautiful.
And I also love all the costumes in this because they're just a lot of emphasis on wealth, and the Countess is really wealthy. She's got like all these dresses with all these buttons on them.
It's a very European style of dress.
Yeah. And I saw this one video that was talking about the importance of gloves in this movie, how whenever the Countess is with the handmaiden, she never has her gloves on because she's the only person she's willing to open up to. But in all the scenes with like the Count and the uncle, she always has gloves on, which I thought was just really interesting and just really good detail.
I think one of the scenes that made me really like want to put this on this list was when you think the Countess is going to the mental institution when it's actually the handmaiden who goes to the mental institution. Like, I legitimately gasped. I was like, what is going on? And at that point, you see the beginning of the movie from the Countess's point of view.
Yeah.
And that's where things turn, where you're like, oh, maybe this isn't what I thought it was going to be.
Yeah, just such a good plot twist.
But there is a good note. So in Korean, the name of the movie is The Lady, referring to the Countess as the main character. But I guess when they translated it to English, it's The Handmaiden, which puts emphasis obviously on the handmaiden as the main character. So I thought that was very interesting to see like which one of them is considered the main character in the film.
And let's talk about the ending with the Count being tortured in the basement.
In the torture room.
Yeah, because that was just crazy. Like, that's one of the... I feel like not the most fucked up thing about this movie, because I feel like, at least for me, it was just having so many changes throughout the movie.
Yeah,
but
it was not knowing who to trust.
Not knowing who to trust. Like, one of the best movies about deception there is.
Yes.
For sure.
Also, like, lying narrators and even deceiving... like the audience, because you're seeing it from one person's perspective, but I feel like when you watch a movie, that's not necessarily what you think. You think, oh, this is like, it's third person because you can see everything, but it shows you that it's from these two different women's perspective and how that really changes each scene.
Yeah, and I feel like just that formatting in general isn't done a lot in movies, which makes
it's not done well. I think they did it really well here.
Yeah, but I feel like they should, like, more people should use this more often if done well, because it just keeps your interest the whole time, because it almost, like...
It's a long movie.
Yeah, it's a long movie, but every time it switches perspective and shows the same thing, it's almost like the refresh button is being hit. Yeah. You have to see it in a whole new light, which I think
It forces you to think and to rethink about what you've previously known. Like, it makes you feel like, who should I trust, and, like, who should I be trusting?
Yeah.
Yeah, the end, it's where he smokes the... So, the point of the movie is... The Countess marries the guy, and eventually he gets taken by the uncle, and basically is like, where is she? And he starts to smoke this like blue cigarette, and he knows that it's poisonous. I forgot what specifically it is. Mercury, and
because in its gas form, it's the strongest.
Yeah. So when he's smoking it, he knows he's dying. But he's like, oh, you know what all this smoke is right now? That's mercury. And he's like, you're going to die, uncle. And the uncle does die.
Yeah.
And it was like a great ending because, patriarchy doesn't win. Her trauma doesn't win.
Yeah. And actually, the next movie we're talking about is also Korean and also about a struggle for power between two different classes, really.
Yeah, not by the same director, though.
Mm-mm.
So our next film is Parasite, unless there's anything you want to add.
No,
I highly recommend. This is...
Oh, yeah, definitely. I feel like not enough people have seen The Handmaiden, but everyone would love this movie.
Yeah, I talk about it too much. So our next film is Parasite. If you don't know, it's probably one of the biggest foreign films of 2019, if not one of the biggest films of 2019.
Yeah.
It has maybe like 6 or more Oscar nominations going on right now for Best Director, Best Picture, Best Foreign Film.
Oh, 6 Oscars exactly. Right on target.
People remember
Good job.
that.
Yeah.
This movie was incredible.
Yeah.
And spoilers, we're going to say what happens. And essentially what this movie is about is we have our main characters is a family of 4. We have a mother, father, sister, and brother. I'm not going to try to pronounce their Korean names because I definitely will butcher it. And I don't even think Claire will understand who I'm talking about. So I'm just going to refer to them as brother, sister, mother, father, or as their jobs in the future. And basically, the son meets up with one of his friends, and the friend is like, hey, can you take over as tutoring duty? And the son, he's like, never been to school. You know, in the beginning of the film, you see how poor they are and how they're basically just folding pizza boxes for money.
And doing it really badly.
Really good. They're not even doing it right. And he's like, oh, just the friend's like, fake it. You'll be fine. So he fakes it, and he realizes that he can get his entire family into to work for this rich family. And it's basically that's the main plot point of this film. And then like halfway through, like shit hits the fan, and it becomes a completely different film.
Definitely the most original film of the year.
That's what I think.
Yeah. And what you find out is there's people living in the basement, and the whole the original family, they're trying to just get all the workers of the rich house just kicked out so they can take their place. And
that comes to some really great scenes. So the sister becomes the art tutor, the father becomes the driver, the mother becomes the maid, essentially, or the caretaker of the house. And the house also has a lot of great, like, respect for it. It was, like, created by this architect, and it's isolated. It has its own gate that you come in.
Yeah. Oh, and one of the things about the house that I really like is, so the whole thing is about, or when I finished watching this movie, the main theme I got out of it was just, like, this cycle of poverty and how, like, it's so hard to escape that lifestyle. And one of the things they talk about is the main father of the rich house. He keeps on commenting on, like, oh, they smell so bad. Like, oh, he's a great driver, but he just smells really bad. And just how the stench of poverty, like, still follows you around, even though you're trying to escape it. And the house that they're always going to, you have to walk up, like, this huge hill and all these steps to get there. And whenever they're showing, like, going from the rich community to, like, the poor community, they're always using it in steps, which is smart because they're trusting the audience to, like, pick up on these small things instead of just telling you, like, this is what I'm trying to get across.
No, I talked about this with my brother, and the one thing I really love about Parasite is that the movie itself is so engrossing that you don't realize, like, the points on capitalism, the points between the rich and the poor until after you've already seen it.
Yeah.
So it's not until the movie's done that you're thinking back on it and you're like, oh, I'm noticing these things right now. And so eventually, you know, going back to the plot, all of the poor family, they end up, you know, infiltrating the rich family, and the rich family goes away for a weekend. And, you know, they're, like, living it up in the house. They're drinking, they're eating, and having a great time. And all of a sudden, the old housekeeper comes back, and she's, like, beaten. Yeah. And literally, as soon as she, like, pulls on the doorbell, like, there's a different shift.
Yeah. That is just...
together.
Even though she's just, like, a regular person, it's so scary when she's at the door, because you're like,
why is she here?
Why is she here? What is she doing here? Like, if I was working at the house, I don't think I would have let her in.
And also, the housekeeper doesn't know that all the people they hired are actually family.
Yeah.
The rich family doesn't know either. They all just assume that you have a connection. Like, oh, I know. The whole point is that, you know, once the son was hired, he's like, oh, I know someone who would be good. And once she was hired, she's like, oh, I know someone that would be a good driver. Or I know someone that knows someone. And that's how they all kind of got the job. So for the housekeeper, she comes in and she basically shows the new housekeeper that there's this hidden bunker that was for, like, nuclear war that the original architect never told the new family. And I was gonna say the maid is the one who's the hardest to get out, just because
she's lived there the longest. So she's got like a horrible peach allergy. And that scene is so funny, and it's so well edited.
It's so well edited. There definitely, I watched a video on YouTube, it's like why it's the best edited scene. It's funny, it's hilarious. It's also quite cruel what they do to her, but like there's a point in the film where you're rooting for the poor family, and there's a point where you're not, because like to infiltrate this family, they trigger her very severe peach allergy and accuse her of having TB. Yeah. Which is terrible, and that's why she gets fired from her job. And then they had an old driver, and they accuse him of
having sex in the back
seat, but the rich family takes it as like him raping someone. Yeah. And that was like its own thing. You're destroying these two people's lives. Yeah. But going back to when the old housekeeper comes back, so there's this like bunker, and her husband had been living in the bunker for like 4 years. Like had not seen daylight, and there's these like flickering lights when you walk into the house, and he controls it from down there. And essentially, the old housekeeper is like, please, can you leave him here? There are loan sharks going after him, which is also another commentary on what people have to do to survive when they don't have the money to pay things off. Yeah. And she was like, I think she was going to say no. And then all of a sudden her entire family comes barreling in. And the old housekeeper is like, wait, like you four all know each other. And it becomes this kind of like, fight for control of who gets to keep this job and keep this lifestyle.
Yeah, wait, that particular scene, watching it the second time, it reminded me of the scene in The Incredibles when, like, the main bad guy, I forget his name, but, like, pulled the whole family together and was like, oh, it's a family. And that's sort of what she did. She was like, oh my god, they're a family.
That's because the son starts saying he's like, father. And she's like, wait a minute. And there's also this whole thing on phones, I feel like. Anytime they're recording something, that's proof of something. Which obviously makes sense. But, so then it becomes this weird control for power. And while this is all happening, the other family is coming back because it was raining.
Because they're supposed to be on a camping trip for the son's birthday.
But it was raining, and therefore they had to come back.
Yeah, so all this is going on, and they've got to, like, clean the house, and the mother has to, like, make them dinner, and they're trying to, like, keep the other maid and her husband in the basement, and they're all doing this within a span of 8 minutes. So it was extremely stressful.
And also because the old housekeeper wants to tell the wife that they're all the family, which would ruin the whole, like, ruse of them making all this money and becoming, getting out of their lifestyle. Yeah. So that's all happening, and then they end up, like, there's, like, a pretty funny scene where the new housekeeper, she's making dinner, and you can see there's these really great stairs that lead from the basement to the main floor of the house, and it's basically like a black little, like, hallway, but you can't see anything. So you see her the old housekeeper walk up the stairs, and the new housekeeper just kicks her down the stairs. And it's a funny moment until you realize
she's got a horrible concussion.
And she eventually dies from that. Yeah. And essentially, like, she, the new housekeeper killed the old one. Yeah. And then from that point, the husband, who's been down there for 4 years, who hasn't seen light, who is now, his sole person that he had contact with is dead. He, at the end of the film, basically kills
a daughter.
Kills a daughter, Jessica.
Yeah, and then after Jessica from Illinois, after she dies, another part. See, it's such a complicated movie.
There's so many things going on.
There's that part, and during that moment, the son from the rich house also goes into a seizure, and the reason for that is because there was one time on his birthday, years before, where the son had gone downstairs to, like, get cake and eat it, and the husband is coming up from the staircase, since that's where that's at night he's always getting food, since that's the only time he can, like, actually go upstairs without anyone seeing him, and the son sees, like, just his eyes, and the way it's shot, it's like the nose, it's the nose up, and it almost looks like he doesn't even have, like, pupils or anything. It's just like completely white. He just looks like a ghost, which causes the son to, like, go into shock and starts having a seizure. So at the birthday party, Jessica is, like, there's blood everywhere, she's dying, and then the son is having a seizure.
Because he recognizes the guy.
So the father is trying to take care of Jessica, while the other father is screaming, like, no, like, we need to go to the hospital right now. And he has this one moment where he's
all the rich people all leave.
Yeah.
Which, like, makes sense, like, there's a tragedy going on, but no one tries to help the family. Like, the poor family, when they all realize, you know, like, someone stabbed their daughter, they're trying to help her, like, no one tries to go help, essentially, which was her English name was Jessica.
And then after that, the father just snaps and then kills the other father.
Kills the rich father.
So then he runs back into the basement and essentially takes the place of the other husband.
Yes. And the end of the film is he basically does this whole, how the old housekeeper's husband would communicate, or how he thought he was communicating with the rich husband was through the lights. He would do Morse code. Yeah. So the son would then visit the house thinking, like, he just kind of, I think, misses it. It was a very big deal for him. And he saw this like, the lights flickering. And it's actually his father writing him a letter, basically saying, like, this is what happened. Because since, after that huge event, the son had been hit on the head by the housekeeper's husband. And, you know, you didn't know if he was going to make it. Eventually he does. And then he goes back to the house, he sees this letter, and he realizes his father's alive. And no one knows where the father is. No one knows that the father is in that basement, and no one knows about the basement. Yeah. That's the thing, that it's still kept a secret.
Because the police suspected, like, oh, the family knows where the father is, but in really, like, they had no idea. And they had, like, detectives coming after them and everything.
And he writes this whole letter, basically, to his father, which is a future where he goes to school and he becomes really rich and he buys his house and he's reunited with his family. And it was, like, so beautiful. And you see it happen. You see him, you know, tour the house. You see him buy the house. And the father just comes up the stairs and it's all in broad daylight. And he just rejoins the family. And then at the end, you realize it's just something he's hoping to happen. It's not something that has happened. But it ends on a hopeful note.
Yeah.
But, yeah, it was good. It ends where it started. With a lovely shot of the house in the film, where the poor family live. It's these houses in Korea where it's basically a basement house. Like, they're below ground, but they have a sliver of window that you can see onto the street. So it's as if they are, you know, above ground, but really they're not. It gives them this kind of hope that they can, you know, reach to higher. Yeah. Which I thought was a good touch. Also, one thing I really liked about this film was I love the sister, how the sister is an art tutor, and she's like, the son has had a trauma. I can tell from this corner of the painting.
The
schizophrenic corner of this drawing. And the funniest part was that she's like, oh yeah, I looked it up online and then I just bullshitted the rest of it.
No, that was great.
And she's so good at it.
Yeah. She's like one of the best con artists there is. Like, she's really good at Photoshop and made basically like a college diploma for the brother
when he first got the job.
Yeah.
And I love the mom in this movie as well. She's really great. The one thing I was upset about the Oscars is that none of these people were nominated for acting.
They won the SAG Award last night.
They just won the SAG Award.
Which, like, we're really happy about.
And I think they could have replaced, I'm salty about the Best Actress or Best Actor. They could have put any of these people because no one is really a main. Everyone is quite supporting. Yeah. So anyone could have done. I thought the mother was really great. She was pretty funny.
Yeah, no, I like the mom in it. So there were no nominations at the Oscars for acting categories. We have another episode about this, but I just want to hear your opinion one more time. Best Picture, do you think they'll win?
I think they should win.
Yeah.
I think they'll probably win Best Foreign Film.
Yeah.
I truly think this was one of the greatest films of 2019. It was shot beautifully. The one thing I've talked about is where you watch the movie and then you think about the themes. The reason we put this on like this most fucked up playlist is that because you're constantly thinking about it. There's so much to talk about and there's so much care that he put into this. Yeah. That you can dissect like a frame in this film and still have 20 things to talk about.
Yeah. Another thing that we're supposed to get back around to was there's one scene right after the whole fiasco where the family's trapped at the house and they're trying to avoid the rich family. They go back to their old home. And you're sort of thinking at this point, like, oh, good, like, that was so intense, like, I need, like, a break, like, I need it to be something calm. Yeah. And it's pouring rain, and the whole house is flooded since they live in the basement.
Not just their house, like the entire neighborhood is flooded.
Mm-hmm.
And there's this like shot where the water is flowing down. So they're always walking down from the house, obviously, because from rich to poor, you go on a lower level. And there's always water running down. And he has like these beautifully white shoes.
Yeah.
And you can tell he's very like hurt about that, where he's like, I'm going to ruin my shoes, but I have to go down.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was like...
And it was just such a messy scene.
And they end up in basically, I assume it's like some sort of cafeteria, gymnasium sort of thing, where a bunch of other people are there, and then they have to go to this birthday party the next day because the rich mother wants it.
Yeah.
And she keeps saying on the phone when the father's driving around, oh, the rain is such a blessing. You know, it's such a blessing because the birthday party was so much better now that it rained. We have a gorgeous day outside. And you can tell from that point that she's just ignorant to what's going on. The fact that so many people were displaced and she's calling it a blessing it's a whole different story, and how like the rich don't understand.
There's a lot of emphasis on like what money does to your personality, because there's one line from the poor mother. She's having a conversation with her husband, and the husband's like, oh, like, they're all so nice. And she's like, yes, of course they're nice. It's because they're rich. If I had this money, I would be nice too.
Yeah, and also, we talked about the smell before. So where this comes from is where the dad talks about how, oh, the rich father, he says, oh, the driver's so good, except that he smells. And he's like, I can't really place the smell. It smells like the subway. And he's like, oh, everyone else like are their new workers smell like that too. And then they're trying to like, oh, we have to use different soap. And the sister goes, no, that's not the smell of soap. That's just the smell of being poor. And you realize like they like, you know, turn their nose up to this, and they're constantly mentioning it, where like, oh, it smells so much, or like she's plugging her nose, or the rich mother starts to notice it more. It really hurt me. I was like, you don't have to be so mean about it.
Any other thoughts on Parasite?
I do think that the rich family's view of like how poor people live is very different. In the film, when they find the underwear in the car to fire the first driver, they're like, oh, she must have been on drugs because who forgets her underwear? Like, that's like something you wouldn't necessarily forget if you were having consensual sex in a car. They said, oh, he must have drugged her. And then at the end of the film, the parents are on the couch because their son wants to do the whole teepee thing. So he's like in the backyard doing it, and they're on the couch watching, and they start to like make out, and they start to kind of role play being poor. And she's like, oh, give me drugs. And he's like, of course. And you can see like they really have no concept of how people live. Like for them, it's this other reality.
It's fun to them.
Yeah, it's a fun and games to them.
Off.
You know, So that's the one thing I wanted to point out. But you haven't seen it yet. I highly recommend. Like, I was afraid it wasn't going to be worth all this hype I was hearing, and it was worth it.
So worth the hype. I also think it's interesting. I haven't seen this other movie, but Bong Joon-ho also has another movie called The Host.
I've not seen The Host.
No, neither have I, but I just think like Host, Parasite.
He did do a movie with Netflix called Okja.
Oh, haven't seen that.
He really likes to play with themes of capitalism and rich and poor, and that's throughout all of his films. That's very apparent in Okja as well, even though it's about like a weird hippo pig hybrid.
But he's just like a great filmmaker, and I hope that since Parasite's gotten so much attention, it gives him the opportunity to make like more of the movies he wants to make.
Give like better representation for, you know, Korean cinema, because we have 2 Korean movies on this list, and they're great.
Okay, our last movie of the night, which takes place completely during the daytime, Midsommar.
Let's go. I freaking love this movie. So, if you couldn't tell from our last podcast where we talked about Midsommar not getting any nominations for anything, Claire and I love this movie.
This is, I think, my favorite movie of the year.
Really?
Okay, this is weird because it's like a cult movie where lots of people die, but I found it so personal and comforting.
Really?
Okay, because I think the way, what were you going to explain?
So, I just listened to the A24 podcast between Ari Aster and Robert Eggers, and he talks about Midsommar, and he talks about how Ari Aster, who directed Hereditary, he did Midsommar as well, and how he doesn't really see it as horror. So for the main character, played by Florence Pugh, her name's Dani, he sees it as like a fairy tale sort of thing, where she's coming to, while for everyone else in the film, it's this like folk folktale like horror film. I loved like the way he described it because it really reigns true to the film. But yeah, that's what I wanted to mention.
No, I just thought the thing I loved was Dani was just such a good character, and I love the way she's portrayed dealing with the loss of a family member, and just this whole time she's trying to cope with the loss of her sister who also killed her parents.
Yeah, the one thing I really liked about this movie is that even though I feel like it was advertised as like this horror film, it's much more about Dani's journey.
It's really character driven.
It's very character driven.
Because she's just trying to like find a new. She doesn't really know this, but like what she's missing is a community that like accepts her, because she has her horrible boyfriend Christian, and he's just really doesn't. He wants to end the relationship, but this horrible tragedy came up with like her, and he's like, oh, I can't do it right now. She's going through so much pain.
Yeah, like she really can't be alone.
But really, even before that, like he's not there for her.
Yeah, he's never there for her. So the story, like when I first saw it, I was like, cool, we're gonna be in Sweden the whole time. And the story starts out and like dark. It's like snowing outside. It's pretty dark, and it if you haven't, I definitely recommend watching this movie twice because there's a lot of like homemade sort of things that I really enjoy. The first shot of the entire film spoils the whole movie.
Yeah.
It's this, like, I don't even know what to describe it.
A tapestry.
A tapestry in it. And if you look it up online, which is what I did, it essentially shows, like, the parents dying, and then they go on this journey and all these things happening, which we're going to mention before. So it starts out, you assume some American city, and it's this girl, she's calling her boyfriend. She's like, I got this weird email from my sister, she's not answering me. And you see a shot into the parents' house, and you're like, oh, they're sleeping. Like, she called them, they're fine. And you realize, no, they're not fine. The sister who was bipolar killed herself and her parents. And the email she sent was like something along the lines of like, everything's dark, I'm taking them with me. And she kills them she took like the car hose and basically did carbon monoxide poisoning to like directly to herself and then to her parents. So when you saw the parents sleeping, they weren't sleeping, they were dead. And the boyfriend is like, oh, Dani's calling me, like, everything's gonna be fine, stop freaking out. And then you get the set, and then as soon as after that call ends, you go to the boyfriend's point of view, and all of their, he's like, you know, at a pizza place or a bar or something with his friends, and they're like, dude, break up with her. Like, is that seriously her again? And then Florence, who was so good, she just starts yelling no once he gets the second phone call, and you're like, shit, has hit the fan.
Yeah, you just, like, whenever she's emotional, like, you just really feel it. Like, she does such a good job.
Especially in this movie, her character is very emotional. Like, she's always crying. She has a lot of pressure on herself. She's always very apologetic to her boyfriend and to everyone.
Even, like, when she's not supposed to. Because there's one scene where she's like, oh, like, Christian forgets her birthday, and she's like, oh, I'm sorry, I should have reminded you. Or it's like, no, Dani, you're our queen, you're our May queen. Don't be apologizing for that.
And the reason this whole movie goes to Sweden is because they're all, I assume, graduate students in college. I love how they're anthropology majors. Shout out to other anthropology majors. And essentially, one of them is from Sweden. He's like, oh, I'll take you back to where I live. We're going to have this huge midsummer like, ceremony. And all the guys were going to go. And Christian is like, oh, I'm going to invite Dani because I don't want her to be alone. But she's not going to come. She's not going to come. And he keeps saying that. And I'm like, of course she's going to come. Yeah. That's the whole point of this movie. And he does a great transition to them on the plane, by the way. I love that. And yeah, I don't know what to go when they're in Sweden.
Oh, yeah. So they're in Sweden, and they go to this, like, kind of hidden community out in the woods.
It's like a commune.
Yeah, and it's all, like, they're all wearing white, and it's all very natural. They're on shrooms for part of it, so, like, what Ari Aster does, which is really cool, is, like, it's all psychedelic.
It's very
So,
psychedelic.
like, everything is moving in the background sometimes.
When they're on shrooms, the plants are moving.
The plants are moving, and if you pay attention, the nature forms faces, too. So there's one scene where it's the sister with the tube coming out of her mouth that's, like, hidden in the woods.
Oh, I didn't
like,
notice that.
with leaves. Yeah, it's really interesting. But anyway, they're at this, they're at the community.
And they move to, I guess they hike to where the actual Midsommar, which is, like, the true community. So they kind of, like, have a pit stop outside the community where they meet up with Pelle, who's the Swedish guy, his brother, and he introduces them, and then they take shrooms, they go to the actual community, which is I would have to say is very like, I don't even know how to describe it. It's like in this open field, and the houses are kind of half buried in. They're not like normal houses. I feel like they kind of feel like Tim Burton-y to me.
Yeah, and the whole community, they all take care of one another. So they all share food. You see later that they all share emotions at the same time.
Yeah.
And all the kids are raised as if they're everyone's kids.
Yes. So when he says, "Oh, this is my sister," it's not necessarily like his sister. It's someone he grew up with, or he considers a sister.
Yeah.
They're not like blood related.
Yeah. So I guess the moment where everything really like turns crazy is during every 90 years they have a sacrifice. Well, they say they
call it a great feast. So Pele says, "Oh, it's," or one of the other guys says, "Oh, it's been 90 years since we've had this great feast."
Yeah.
And no one really knows what that means, and no one is trying to explain it. And eventually they have this feast, and then they have these a woman and an old guy, and you see them go to this cliff. And I knew what was going to happen, even though I didn't watch the movie before. I just saw it, and I was like, oh, like, they're probably going to jump off the cliff.
Yeah.
And they did.
Yeah. And it's pretty graphic, and, like, the one guy, the woman hits her head on a rock and instantly dies, and the man falls and misses the rock.
And he's booed.
Yeah.
That's the thing. He's booed because he didn't miss the rock. And someone
I don't remember that.
They're, like, yelling at him.
Oh, I interpreted that as, like, he's in agony, and they scream with him.
Oh, I thought of it as like, yo, you missed your mark. Now we have to go get a hammer and kill you.
Yeah, and then
I took that as a different one.
Yeah,
but I can see that.
Yeah. So then they all they've got to like manually kill him with this huge wooden hammer. So then after that, all the other people are really freaked out who aren't part of the community, because it's like Danny, Christian, Josh, I forget his name.
The guy from The Good Place is in it.
Yeah, he's so good. And then Simon and Simon's boyfriend.
Yeah. So there's 2 British people who come with Pele's brother, who I guess was in London, and then Pele, who brings Danny, Christian, the guy from Bandersnatch.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know what his name is. He vapes the whole time, if you've seen the movie. That's
and then
him.
Defecates on, like, the very important tree.
He's
a screw-up.
He's a screw-up.
He's a fuckboy. That's who he is.
He is.
Yeah.
And then there's the guy from The Good Place who plays... I forgot who he plays in The Good Place. And then I think that's it. Yeah, that's 4 of them.
Oh, wait. Josh is the guy from The Good Place. And then Will Poulter plays Mark.
Oh, Mark, who is the... vaping dude from Bandersnatch. And they're all brought there, and everyone basically starts to freak out.
Yeah.
But they're anthropology students, at least Will and
Christian
Christian and Josh, and they're like, I want to study these people. They want to stay.
Yeah.
And from that point, I knew that there was no way they were surviving, because a clan doesn't survive this long because they trust people into their community to write about it. Like that's when I was like, please, this isn't happening.
But what's really interesting is, going into this what kind of movie it's going to be, where it's like the whole genre of each person, like, we're going to just keep on killing people off. One by one. Which in a horror movie, like, you expect it, and sometimes if there's only that element, it's boring. But here you're just so focused on, like, the character dynamics and the relationship between Christian and Danny, where it's like, that people are going to continue to be killed off, but you're not really interested in that as much. You're more interested
But also, you don't see them get killed off.
Yeah, which I kind of think is...
They disappear, but you don't see their deaths.
Yeah.
You see them maybe get hit over the head, or but you won't see them die. Yeah. You won't see them get taken either.
Yeah, no, there was you sort of see, you see fragments of that at the very end, because Christian, we'll go over this later, but he's involved in
mating ceremony.
In a mating ceremony, and while he's running around naked, he sees all the people who had been killed off. And I saw this online that was very interesting, that each death represents an element. So there's Josh, who's buried under the earth, and you see his foot sticking up.
Yeah.
Simon is hanging in the air. Connie was used in a water ritual. And they show that in the extended version where they drown someone, but it's not in the actual movie.
Okay, I didn't see anything.
And then Christian's burned alive with the fire element.
Well, Mark was skinned alive.
Oh.
which if you watch the film, the one thing I love about this film is that he hints to everything. It must have taken a ton of planning. So besides, like, obviously the tapestry in the beginning, there's a tapestry in the film that talks about a woman trying to get a man to love her, which is played out in the film. They stay in this place, I guess it's like, what, the 26-year-olds to whatever-year-olds. They stay in this huge wooden kind of, like, barn building, but on the inside it's painted white and it has a bunch of, like, drawings or paintings about what's going to happen. And when you're watching it, you don't think about that. You think, oh, like, they're just focusing on this. But when you rewatch it, you realize this is what's happening to every character. Yeah. Like, whether it's the bear being burnt alive when Christian's having that meeting, or whether it's Danny kind of watching, the Mayflower, those paintings of the Mayflower Queen. And you're like, oh, like, you don't think that has importance, but it does. So in the beginning of the film, there's a bunch of these kids playing. And they're like, what are they playing? And they're like, oh, Skin the Fool. And Mark, who is kind of basically the fool in the film, he pees on this, like, ancient tree that has their, like, relatives buried with it, or something along that lines, and he's skinned alive, and someone wears his face.
Oh, yeah, that was
creepy.
Oh, yeah.
So there are things like that made it really interesting, and it's really fun to, like, go back and look into it. Yeah. So once, I guess if you go back to plot-wise, once the two older people, they jump off the cliff, there's another ceremony basically where they have to, announce the Mayflower Queen, and I love that scene. It's where basically they dance around the pole, and whoever stays, who doesn't fall, is crowned the queen. Yeah. And Danny ends up being crowned, and it was so nice because she also has this whole community who's so happy.
I'm so happy
the
for
Swedish
her.
guy kisses her. Yeah. And he, like, clearly likes her a lot. He kisses her in this film. He has a great line where he remembered her birthday and gave her, a drawing of her for her birthday present, even though her own boyfriend, who she's been dating for 4 years, didn't remember.
I would burn him alive too if that were me.
And then
maybe.
And then towards when she wants to leave, he asks, "Oh, like, why are you still with Christian?" And she's like, "What do you mean?" He's like, "Do you feel held by him? Like, is he your home?
Does he feel like home to you?"
And you're just like, and you see this realization on her face that no, he's nothing like that to me. And so she becomes part of this community, and then the 90-year feast basically ends up with
like a burning of the one house where they sacrifice a lot of different people. So they have all their sacrifices done already, and then the main queen, I guess, gets to decide the last sacrifice. So everyone's like, oh, Danny, like, should we sacrifice this guy from the community? Or should we sacrifice Christian?
And for, like, a minute, you're like, maybe she won't pick Christian. So the whole point is that they have 4 outsiders who are part of the ceremony, and then they have, like, 4 people from the community. So it was obviously the 2 people who had died in the beginning of the movie, they were part of the sacrifice, and then they had picked 2 other people from the community. And then the 9th person was up to the choice of the Maid Queen, which is Danny. And at this point, Christian is, like, completely paralyzed, and you kind of see her stare at him. Yeah. And you know he's about to.
I know. I almost see the thing that Ari Aster does so well is, like, even though I'm definitely on Danny's side, they do throughout the movie. They kind of make Christian sympathetic a little bit.
Well, I think they try to. I didn't think Christian was, like, a terrible human. Yeah, no, I think he was a selfish guy, and he never wanted to. I think obviously he liked her at some point, but he didn't like her the way she needed him to, and he didn't know how to break up with her, which is like a hard thing. Like, her entire family died, she literally has no one. Like, he wasn't gonna break up with her then. Yeah, but obviously, like, he doesn't try to be there for her. He has this, like, fakeness to him about being there for her.
Yeah, and I just think the scene at the end where he's in the bear suit, like, that, it freaked me out at least, because I was just thinking, gosh, what if he's, like, even though he can't move, but what if he can see and understand everything that's going on, and how scary that must have been?
I think he does see and hear.
But that just, like, freaked me out. But anyway, I'm so happy for Danny. I just really want to put that out there. She was my May Queen.
I love glad Florence Pugh was great in this film.
Yeah, she found her community at the end. I just love that. Oh, The other thing I want to talk... Well, the reason that Dani chose Christian to be the last sacrifice is because Christian was drugged, but she didn't know this. She didn't know this. And he was having sex with someone else from the community who had chosen him. Because it seems like this happens in the community a lot, just because there's a lot of interbreeding. Or some interbreeding.
They talk about how they don't have incest unless it's so they have this special like I guess it's sort of like a Bible, but like a telling of the community, and the only person who's allowed to draw them is this special person, but they're only bred out of incest. Yeah. And that's the only time they can be born. Because they're so marginalized from the community that they don't have a biased standpoint. Yeah, they don't. Mm-hmm.
Which is like
as an audience member, it's like no, that's a bad thing. That they purposely do incest to create these, handicapped and physically deformed people. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but the one the one lady from the community who's trying to hit on Christian feeds him like pubic hair and like puts
her period
blood. But I just want to
drink.
Yeah, I just want to say sex ed's important because if you're on your period and you have sex, you're less likely to be pregnant since your egg's not there. So she's not getting pregnant probably. So it's important if you live. It's important things to know, folks. I'm just saying.
Another thing I really liked about this film was kind of like, at least for me, it felt very like Wes Anderson homemade aspect.
Oh yeah.
So there's this point where they have this like temple, which is in the end of the film where they end up burning everyone. Mm-hmm. But it's this perfectly triangular, like bright yellow, and it's against this plain field. There's nothing else around it, and the way they show it at first is this wide shot, and it seems very much like, very symmetrical and very like Wes. As soon as I saw it, I was like, oh, this seems like something Wes Anderson would do. No, and also true. Like the painting seemed this very like homemade aspect to me, where it's like, oh, like obviously it was a community because they took care of everything.
It just all seemed handcrafted.
Yes, I guess not handmade. Handcrafted is the better word. Mm-hmm.
Oh, the other thing I want to mention is in the director's cut, there's this really funny scene, and I think we'll probably think it's funny because we're college students, but it's an extended version of when Christian and Josh were talking to each other after Christian's like, oh, I think I'm going to do my paper on this community as well. And Josh is like, what do
you mean? I literally talked about doing this.
Yeah.
And they're talking about their thesis. That's intense stuff.
So Josh gets like really angry about it. And there's this one line he has where it's like, Christian, I always have to walk you through everything. Before you met me, like you couldn't even use JSTOR the right way. You didn't know how to use it. And JSTOR is just... It's basically scholarly Google where you just type in an article. And I just thought that was so funny because I don't know how many people would pick up on how funny that is, but like it's literally so easy to use. Yeah. I would recommend watching the extended cut though, because there are some really good scenes that I think add to the movie. Yeah. Like there's one scene in the car ride over where Dani has another friend who's like, oh, I know I'm early, but happy birthday. And then they also flesh out the relationship between Christian and Dani a little bit more. I mean, I love both versions. And they also have another ritual where there's a child who's going to be drowned.
A lot of death.
I know, a lot of death. I wasn't nominated for anything at the Oscars, and that makes me sad.
Like visual effects, too. There's a point when Dani has her flower crown on, and there's this one flower that's like kind of breathing a little bit, and when she's sitting at the table, the food is kind of moving a little bit. There's like, you can tell that there's something being altered where they are.
Yeah. Oh, did you hear the theory about Pele? That he was the one who killed the sister and the parents in order to get Dani on the trip?
No, what?
Yeah, so when I was watching that a second time, I'm not sure I believe it because in my perfect world, I really like Pele.
Yeah,
even though there's a lot of people who like totally believe this theory of like, oh no, like he's the one who did it, and he did invite all of his friends to be slaughtered, but his friends didn't have. I mean, they didn't have good morals, but they didn't deserve to die.
Where's the proof?
I think because the way it was taped on her face, it looks like. It's just like a very weird suicide way.
I was gonna say I saw that too, and I'm like, oh, she vomited on herself. Like that's, I'm like that's a weird way to specifically do it on yourself.
Yeah. So I don't really believe that, and I always think about this movie. What happens to Danny after this?
I think she's just with the community.
That's what I think. Like, what if she wanted to leave the community?
I don't think that's. I think she's finally felt at home.
That's what I think. I think she feels at home, and I think her and Pele will get married, and I think that will make me very happy. So yeah.
Thank you for listening. This is going to be a little long one, but thanks for joining us, and let us know what you think about these movies.
Yeah, and if
also just mentioning, we actually have a Twitter and an Instagram. It's Makingsenseofmovies. On Instagram, it's an underscore between each word. And what's our Twitter?
Sense Movies, I think.
And we also have a Letterboxd account. We'll link all of these in our description for this episode, but please follow us if you want to know any more information.
And comment about movies that you think fucked you up for life.
Yeah, we'd love to watch them.
All right, we'll be back again soon. Bye.